Okay, so this is part 2 of the series on diarrheal disease, and so we'll continue. And so here, and again, prevention. So why are you talking about Pepto-Bismol in prevention? I thought it would be a treatment. Actually, there's some studies, and this is a quote from one of that studies, is that when you're taking in the form of two tablets of Pepto-Bismol 4 times a day with food, it have shown that travelers' diarrhea can be prevented from 40% to 60, and I even saw some studies up to like 64%, compared to 14% with a placebo. So that means that this is why I'm talking about prevention. And so that means that if you're taking Pepto-Bismol, if you're not sick, so if you have somebody that is sick in your group and you start people like this on 2 tablets 4 times a day with food, basically you're decreasing your chance of getting the bugs yourself. It has a little bit, and the reason is that it has a mild microbial activity as well as anti-secretory and anti-inflammatory properties. And what we're seeing before is that the secretory can have an impact on some diarrhea, and so antimicrobial as well, as like the bugs won't that. And this is the reason why here is that the way it's released into your belly and things like that. And so so yeah, if you have someone in your group and you're on in a bug out situation, or even if you're bugging in, and we'll talk a little bit more about the treatment, but basically in the bugging in, what I would do is that if one person is taking care of someone with the disease, I would put like one person in charge of, you know, bring the meals and taking care of that person. Well, now you can have someone that it takes Pepto-Bismol. Again, if you don't have the contraindication, which we'll see a little bit what they're coming, but if you have someone that you can take the Pepto-Bismol and 4 times a day and stuff, you could decrease your chance of getting sick like this. So it's a that's why it's in the prevention category. Here's the contraindication. So people, children less than 3 years old, because Pepto-Bismol has basically aspirin. So anybody that is allergic to salicylate, so anybody that is allergic to aspirin or something like this, Pepto-Bismol has some in it, and this is why in 3-year-old we don't recommend to have it too as well. And so people that are already taking medication with salicylate or having anticoagulant, because you can increase their bleeding time. Pregnancy is one against that, and people with some gout and chronic renal insufficiencies, because all NSAIDs, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatory steroid medication it have an impact on the renal function. So if you're already having chronic renal insufficiency, it can apply and can have an impact on it. And so this is why people with chronic renal insufficiency, it's not quite recommended. As well as, if you think about it too, and this is more from the literature of people involved in like marathons and adventure racings and things like that, taking ibuprofen is not quite recommended if you're dehydrated, because it decreases your renal function. And so whoever is going to take care of this person that has diarrhea and stuff, make sure that they drink a lot of water and stuff if they're about to take 4 pills of Pepto-Bismol, because it has the NSAIDs of aspirin in it, and it could affect their kidney function as well. GI precaution, and this is why I put it over here. So contact precaution, normally it's just wear gloves, put a gown, and wash your hands. But really important, anytime that you have diarrhea involved, so every time that there's vomits or things like that, do not wash your hands with an alcohol base. You can wash it after, but at one point after you took care of this patient, you have to clean your hands with soap. And the reason is that there is some bacteria coming out of the guts that are not killed by alcohol. They're too strong, and they can only be killed with soap. So that means one of them, and this is what we call GI precautions. So they're the same thing as contact precaution, but instead of being able to just wash your hands with the alcohol-based medication, you have to clean your hands with hand soap. So regular stuff, and it takes longer, because alcohol gel. You just, you know, wipe it up for about 15-30 seconds. It dries on your hands, everything is killed. With soap, we're talking about washing very carefully, and then you have to dry your hands and things. And so this is what washing hands is. Just it takes longer. But anybody that has diarrhea, you have to wash your hands with the soap, non-alcohol basis. So this is what we call GI precautions. And again, it wasn't the precaution, because if you do a good precaution of it, so that means you get the person separated from the group so that nobody else gets sick. You get them away from any of the foods and things like that, obviously, and you know, to break the chain. And we'll talk a little bit more in the water part of it, of how to break the chains. And in the treatment, we're talking about that whole refrigeration, salt or solution, depending of who you talk to. Here's 2 recipes. And why there are honeycombs here is that some people and some studies have shown that if you put honey instead of regular sugar, we talk about it more in wound care. Honey has an antibacterial function to it, and so some studies have shown that maybe it has a little bit of an advantage versus regular sugar. And I mean, if you already have honey, and I mean, we recommend having honey in your first aid kit and stuff, might as well just use it for your to do your mix as well, for if you do your own mix. And so honey can have an advantage and have an antimicrobial effects on the guts. And so some people were having their diarrhea a little bit closer. Basically, what you want to do with people, again, we all know that you can survive like 3 weeks without food, but only 3 days without drinking. What people die of when diarrheal disease is really they die of dehydration, and because they cannot keep, like when you have like cholera, like very bad cholera, basically they have a bed with a big hole inside. You can lose up to 20 liters a day of just diarrhea. So basically the water just pour out of you, and this is the problem, is that you don't have time to replenish it enough for the person, so they die of dehydration because their bodies start to shut down and everything like that. So it's not so much important about the food here, but so a lot of time, you know, like again, we were talking about that 90, 95, 98% of the time, all you have to do is cut them their solid, like solid eating and things, shoot them to ORS, give them like some fluids and stuff, and they'll be fine. So just make sure that they drink a lot of that stuff, and at one point the diarrhea will decrease. You rehydrate them and slowly reintroduce certain food, and we'll talk later a little bit about what kind of food you can reintroduce. But that's what it is. It's basically, that's the treatment for diarrhea, is drinking and drinking more of that stuff. You don't need to have antibiotic most of the time. You don't need to have intravenous most of the time. You just need to drink a lot of that stuff until the diarrhea, whatever you have inside you, goes away, because that's what it is that your body's trying to get rid of something, and so it's flushing it. The way that it knows how is basically by having diarrhea. If you're vomiting, most likely you had like some raw something. It's trying to get those bacteria out so that it doesn't go into your bloodstream. So that's what the body is trying to do. It's just trying to get rid of all that stuff. And so you just want to rehydrate yourself, so until the body can achieve all this and create enough acidity and fight his own infection inside of him and get rid of that. So those are the, again, 2 recipes. One is with sugar, the other one is with honey. And sometimes in some recipe, as you can see, there's baking soda. Some people say it does help. You don't have, or you can buy also like the premix one, but you can make your own as well. And the solution should just be more salty than your tears. If you have that salt, then you're good to go. There's a little special, and I'll put a link down. There's a little special spoon that you can buy, and basically one part is for the salt, one part is for the sugar, and it says also there's a recipe. All this this stuff here is the recipe on it, and explain to you how to do it, and you just mix it and how much to give and stuff. So I have some in my first aid kits and stuff, so it's just common. It doesn't weigh anything, and it's, you know, you don't have to calculate what is 6 grams again or 8 grams or whatever. You just take whatever they say over here, and you have yourself a mix. So what if the person cannot drink? So if the person cannot drink, here's the other stuff that you can do. You can either put an NG tube, so that's a nasogastric tube. So basically it's a tube that goes through your nose all the way to your stomach, and you can give per that tube those, and I'll put a video down on what's a nasogastric and how to insert one. And then basically the mix that you would give by the mouth, now you give it through the stomach, because if they vomit, that can help sometime to do that, or if they're unconscious or they're decreased level of consciousness, you could still do that. A lot of places in the state, in Africa and thing, or developing country, that's how they'll give for kids, especially if they're too, you know, sleepy. And then the other one is the subcutaneous subcutaneous fluids. And so basically you start it's like starting an IV, but instead of putting it into a vein, you put it under the skin and you give your fluid that way with an absorption. It's not as efficient as an intravenous, but there's less consequences, easy to do. And again, I'll put a video down, and I did a video in the past explaining exactly what subcutaneous fluids are and the reason I choose them, so I'll put a link for that one. Careful with Imodium, as you can see here, and the reason that I'm putting this is that imagine that this is what it's trying to do, and basically you're putting the bottle inside. The bottle can go out, and so what happens is that Imodium basically stops the motility of your stomach, and like I was saying, those bacteria are trying to get out of your body, and so sometimes it's not a good tactic to use an Imodium. And the reason is that because that Imodium will retain all those bacteria because you're not flushing them. And so if they stay in your guts and they grow, they could go into your bloodstream, and now you don't have just a diarrhea, now you have a bacteremia, which is way more worse. And so just be careful with Imodium when you use it, and just be mindful of this. Antibiotics, there's different ones they can use, and we talked about it before in the 6 different the 4 different reasons. So which one to use, again, it depends on which one it is, and we'll do a little bit more different video on antibiotics. And food for a person with diarrhea is the person that is vomiting, what they should kind of rehydrate. You should drink, and this is the person that is able to eat. So that one is not able to eat, there's too much vomiting and stuff. This one is able to eat a little bit, those are what they can eat. And this one is the person after, you know, diarrhea, the things that they can slowly get into it. And this is what not to eat or drink. So fatty, greasy food, any kind of laxative or purge, that makes kind of sense. And highly food, alcoholic drinks is not recommended. And congee is another one. There's a recipe over here. Basically what congee is basically rice that is cooked in a certain way, and it makes this kind of porridge. But rice is recognized as a it really helps, is rice water really helps. It's a little bit like the same thing as an ORS, but it helps with the stomach. So basically that stuff can be awesome to carry. It's very easy to make. Most people have rice in their things. You can mix it up with a few little different things, but if you have diarrhea and you can eat the rice, that's pretty good thing for the congee. And I'll leave you here with the 2 little protocols. So this one here is from when there's no doctor available, basically when to give what. I'll leave it over there, and actually I'll leave you with that one. So we'll talk to you soon.